Hello, hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the Odd Thoughts podcast. At the Odd Thoughts podcast, we like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, have conversations on relatable topics, and discuss whatever comes to mind. My name is Gunther, and I am your host. Welcome to episode 24. For episode 24, I was hoping to talk a little bit about starting over, beginning again in life, beginning again in an aspect of life. Then I transitioned into talking about being the middle child, or kind of being like the middle sibling. Then moved on to talking about new recipes, my wanting to try new food, my insistence on eating what I like, and sometimes the complexity of these new recipes. Then, lastly, I wanted to end it on an article that I had read. A kind of unfortunate article on some of the hidden systems that sit in the cities that we live in. So if you want to listen to any of that, I appreciate you tuning in. Please enjoy. How's everybody doing? I hope everybody's doing okay. I appreciate y'all stopping by. It's good to see you. Just want to let you know that you can take it easy on yourselves. There is just so much that we can judge ourselves on, and we'll make so many missteps and so many mistakes, and we're not always going to do the right thing, or maybe it's right in the moment. Easy to always focus on those wrongs when we feel that's all we can do. It's not easy to know what to do in every single situation. We expect a lot from ourselves, and we try hard, and when we don't succeed and the end goal hasn't turned out how we thought it was going to be, that we hold on to that. Nobody told you how to do this stuff, though. Nobody told you how life was going to be, what was going to happen. Just remember that this is your first time here on Earth. This is your first time experiencing everything that you're experiencing. And others have their own experiences too. We are all just doing our best. You have to know that others are doing just like you do. And it may not look the same, and they may be doing a little bit better. Maybe they're doing a little bit worse, but people are doing it how they do it. So remember that you got to be kind. Kindness isn't guaranteed, and who knows who's going to be kind to you, but as a human, you need to make that choice. You need to be kind to others and always make sure to understand others as you wish to be understood. Because it is also everyone else's first time here on Earth. Humans just do what they can, and that is enough. We're here on a big, beautiful Earth, and we're just living, existing, pushing ourselves to the absolute litmus that we're capable of doing. So take it easy on yourself. Just relax. You're doing good. You are doing enough. But thanks for stopping by nonetheless. I'm doing okay. I've been I've been in a pretty good mood as of like the last couple weeks really it feels like. I've kind of gotten into a new system in my life, I feel like, and sleep a little bit better, and at least it's still not super long, but a little bit better. And I'm starting to find kind of a blend of work in my life and figuring out how I want the podcast to go, and trying to figure out things like outside of my podcasting. Still trying to figure out on if there's any other content that I'm willing to create. Still trying to do my best to avoid the content creator label, more so the influencer label. I don't want to be like I said, I don't want to be a social media influencer. I obviously do post on social media, and quite often social media influencers describe themselves as content creators. But I always feel like if you're a content creator, you're more so actually creating, not just making a little video on some trend or whatever, or about your everyday life or something like that. Those videos are fine, but I want to always make sure that whatever it is that I put out, whether it be a podcast or some sort of narration type video, or maybe I start writing books and maybe I want to make a short film, whatever it may be, that I'm always putting in some sort of creation into it. I just want to be, I'm at this place where I just want to use my imagination and use my mind for something that is enjoyable and not hold myself. I could always go back and work those jobs, those 9 to 5s, restaurant, wherever it may be. But I think I legitimately have an opportunity to do something different. And it's a new type of work for me too, is what I've realized. I kind of get a little hard on myself thinking like, why can't I just be, perfect on these episodes, or, why can't the episode outlines come to me a little easier? And it's because I've never done this before. I've never done the podcasting thing before, and I don't know what that looks like. And I've never been super in like intact with social media, you know what I'm saying? Or in tuned more so. So I'm learning on how this stuff goes. And it takes a certain level of confidence to put things out there. It doesn't take a lot of effort necessarily, a little bit of work. I have to record and put myself out there and do the outlines for my podcast, but there is a little bit of this anxiousness that I feel, and quite often question if I'm really even deserving of putting out something, if I'm even deserving of a podcast for someone to listen to, or any future content I decide to put out. But that's like a natural thing. Anything you do, you're going to question whether it's right, or whether someone's going to, enjoy it, or just whatever it may be. I'll never not have these questions in my head, and undoubtedly there's going to be people out there that won't like me for what I do. Yeah. It's probably best that they don't like me for my podcast rather than for me as a person. You know what I'm saying? Make sure that I stay a good person, and and whether I'm a shitty podcast host or not. Sorry. Just make sure we stay good as people. But yeah, welcome to episode 24. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Like I said, thank you for stopping by. Let's hop into it. Starting over in life often means just beginning again. Sometimes we reach certain times in our lives where we need a reset, a restart more so, whether that be in a new relationship or a job. Maybe you move to a different town, a different city, and just redoing what your life is. Even down to something simpler like your everyday task, fixing something, assembling a new piece of furniture, whatever it may be. Starting over just means from the beginning again. Sometimes you just are looking for a new way to do something, maybe even more effective way to do something. But it is difficult to start over. When you're starting over, you're basically maybe taking everything that you've already done, all the thoughts you've put in and all the actions you've put towards something, and negating them. Not always. We often learn from our previous attempts at things, so hopefully it carries over. But nonetheless, always a search for a new opportunity, a new outlook on something specific, whether it be better or different. Sometimes different is better, sometimes it's also not. We often don't know necessarily how we're always going to be able to do something, whether we're super capable of doing something. So we can be doing a certain aspect of our life wrong, or like I said, not as effective or efficient, living a certain way, doing a certain job because you know that life continues, so kind of need to get things done in my life. Or you're trying your best to do whatever task it may be, and unfortunately, you're just doing it wrong. Not because you're necessarily incapable or stupid or anything like that, but you're not always going to be prepared for every aspect of life, every opportunity that comes your way. But you're trying to help yourself. You're always doing what you hopefully is what's best for you. You're always trying to do hopefully what's best for you. Sorry. So, in that process of starting over, it's only just to make sure you're helping with what you're doing. And sometimes even helping others, right? Sometimes you got to be real that you thought you were doing the right thing and it just wasn't that way. So, you know that you need better. You want to do the best you can always, and when it doesn't turn out that way, that you want to do better. You need better. But it's hard leaving situations or stopping a certain task. You know, like I said, sometimes you're at a job because you need the money. So you kind of sacrifice all these certain things with happiness, and, it's just not a fun job. Or with relationships, you're with someone because you love this person and you've had so many good times with them, but it just turns out that it's no longer the same. Also, like moving away to a new city. Plenty of people just need a new environment. They need to see something different. Also, I mean, as often as I'm such a hard-headed person in my own life, when it comes to doing like everyday tasks or just anything that will better my life in a little bit of a way, I get so, zoned into a certain ideology or a certain way of doing things, certain steps. So when I have to like pause and like start over, it quite often throws me off. But you know that some things are just bad. You know that some moments in your life or some aspects are toxic, right? You know you need to leave a situation and start over because it's been taking all this away from you, or it's traumatic in some way, or even a tough thing to sometimes realize is being forced, or maybe not necessarily a tough thing to realize. I think you definitely realize when you're being forced to start over on something, but there might be a reason that you're being forced, right? Hopefully that giving yourself that chance to begin again, the restarting of whatever it is only a freedom that you can gain, a new way of thinking about things. Why not, too? Especially if you knew that you weren't being as efficient in something, or you weren't doing something correctly, or it just didn't feel right to you and didn't put you in a good space. Why not? It's like kind of throw it at the wall and see what sticks type thing. So, like I said, whether it's a new job, new city, new home, new relationships, just like a new outlook on a certain problem, or it's not necessarily a problem, but a certain aspect of life. I think all we need sometimes is like a fresh mindset, but we don't necessarily know what the fresh mindset looks like. Like I said, I get very, honed in on a certain mindset, a certain way of thinking. So I don't always understand that there's another way. But once you kind of reach that place of that new mindset, you got a new place of thought, it quite often helps. It's kind of like an objective thing. You kind of got to look at what you did and say, well, this wasn't right. This isn't how it was supposed to be. This isn't maybe even what I had planned, right? So I know I need to start over. Not everything goes to plan, obviously, but you can give yourself a chance to at least get close to the plan that you had. Maybe your plan's not correct, though. So that's another thing of sometimes you realize that you had a certain view of how something should go and you really tried to force it and you really tried to put yourself into a good place and you did everything you could and took every process and every action you could, but then the end goal or the end product wasn't right. So, beginning again, restarting. I think quite often we deserve differently sometimes, right? So you shouldn't have to be destined to a mistake or destined into a certain way of life that isn't ideal to how you should be living or how you should be handling something. So we got to realize that it's okay if we take a different approach to something that originally we thought the certain outcome was what was needed best or what was going to be the best way of doing something. But doing things differently is quite often the solution to starting over or the end goal to when you start over. You know that you're going to have to do things differently, whatever doing things towards means. But it is a process. That's a big thing to understand is that it takes time. You did all this stuff and you maybe lived a certain way for so long and or you just were spending so much time on a certain task in your life that you realize that all these steps you took and now you have to kind of erase. You learn from all those things and you learn from the previous process, but you know that with something new it's going to take the same time that you kind of just spent or at least an equated amount of time. And we're going to have multiple chances to start over, hopefully. It's hard, it's a big question to think about the thing of multiple chances and when we're starting over on something, how many chances we should get to start over. But there always are going to be chances. Sometimes you got to maybe look for those chances and work a little harder towards those opportunities, but it's hard to detach from the past. It's hard to even admit that what we were doing wasn't right or wasn't best for us. And so to then have to remove ourselves from that previous way of living or that previous way of thought is difficult, especially when there's like a sense of kind of gone too far. I've been too ingrained in a certain way. But restarting, beginning again, starting over, whatever you want to call it, is something that sometimes is super necessary. And who knows what wrong is and what right is, but just an opportunity to then start over or even that inception of of a thought means that you're already questioning on how you're doing something. So maybe it isn't worth it to ignore it, right? It's really hard to sometimes begin again on things. It takes a long time. It takes a certain amount of action, a certain process. But in the end, it's only trying to give yourself a new opportunity to do better for yourself or just to do differently. Just to know that maybe there is something else to how you do things, how you live, how you work on something, whether it's a new job, new relationship, new city. Like I said before, starting over is hard. But yeah, I feel that I've multiple times tried to like hone in on something and I get frustrated because maybe it worked before or it was fine all the way up into a certain point. But you got to come to that realization. So moving on to the next topic, I wanted to talk about being a middle child. The middle child in between the older sibling and the younger sibling or siblings. There's often like a certain personality that's kind of attributed to the middle child, or a certain stereotype or stereotypes that kind of the middle child has. Now, I don't know if all of those are necessarily true, but I think it'd be fun to kind of give my perspective on what being a middle child is like. Um, I've always considered myself basically just like the gap between my older and my little sister. I've always been that, like, I'm very similar to my little sister and I'm very similar to my older sister, but they themselves aren't necessarily alike. So quite often it's like a color wheel or something like that. You get the older sibling, then the middle is like the blend into the younger. All the cool things when I was younger that my older sibling taught me, then I got to do with my younger sibling, which is great. Um, I've spent most of my life with my younger sibling. My older sister, Kara, is 9 years older than me, so quite a few years older than me, but it never felt that weird. She was awesome to me, and she was in and out of my life at certain points, but I spent a lot more time with my younger sister. And so we're 2 years apart. So we were inevitably going to be pretty close. And even though she's her own person and she has all these beautiful things in her life and she has all these beautiful personality traits, I know that had some sort of influence. We have a similar sense of humor and we enjoy a lot of the same movies and games, and I just get her. I know that she also gets me. We kind of have like a synced brain. And quite often I've kind of referred to, even though she's 2 years younger than me, kind of referred to her as my like my twin. If I was gonna have anything close to a twin, it'd be my younger sister. And then my older sister, like I said, like all the cool things that I learned and taught my younger sister, I learned from my older sister. My older sister was literally the first person that I felt like showed me anything cool, showed me video games and showed me scary movies. And eventually when I got a little older and like became when I became like a preteen and teenager, she was very integral in teaching me like it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to have feelings, helping me justify that stuff. So I very much so have a different type of relationship with Kara, my older sister, and Katie, my younger sister. I love being the middle sibling and being their only brother. I kind of get this like I have like what am I trying to say? I hold it on my shoulders that I just want to be great to them. I want to be a great brother. And whether, I'm my older sister's younger brother, I want to be her big brother. I want to make sure that she feels protected and anything she needs that she can come to me and tell me. And I'm always going to be that for my younger sister. Sorry. I'm always going to be that way for her. And I know they love me. There's been times when, things weren't always great. When me and my little sister were like young, I think quite often we annoyed each other pretty heavily. When you're around each other for like, every day, all the time, it was like, it gets a lot. Good thing we had friends and we were kind of okay with doing our own things, but when we were younger, it was way different, but now she's like my best friend. It's not annoying. Maybe I'm annoying to her, but it's not that annoying anymore. And with my older sister, I've always had like an idolization to her. I've always like idolized my older sister, thought she was sweet, kind, funny, and I relate to her a lot of ways emotionally. So I kind of see what she's gone through, and I know that I can handle it. I see how she's done things, and you learn from that. And I know that she's seen that. She's gone through things in her life, and related to me basically. You know, dealt with the emotions and the feelings that she's had and helped me with mine. And in turn, I've tried to help my little sister with hers. She, my little sister is almost the perfect child, so but it's funny to think about a stereotype with like middle siblings is they're kind of the forgotten sibling. I think that's like the thing is that they're just kind of like, oh, the older sibling, everybody's kind of hard on the older sibling because they're the first child or whatever, and they're supposed to be held to this high standard. And then with the younger sibling, you're just kind of like, whatever. They're the baby. They can just do whatever, walk all over. And then you kind of just forget about the middle child. You're like, oh yeah, them. I was my mom's first child. Me and my little sister had the same mom. And my older sister has a different mom, but with my dad, we're all the same. We all have the same dad, so I'm a middle in that sense. But my parents didn't treat me like a middle sibling. Um, well, uh, maybe. There's always like this joke that kind of goes on with my family that you can sit me in like the corner of a room, like when I was a kid, and give me like a block and like a Hot Wheel, and I could play for an hours. So that was quite often my childhood. You'd take me somewhere, and I would just be like sitting in a chair, just like twiddling my thumbs. So maybe it's more so what the personality trait actually is of the middle kid. But I never felt like I was ignored necessarily. I was also the one boy, so there's perks to being the boy. Having two sisters is a blessing. I got to be in touch with my feminine energy my whole life. But also, like, kind of freaks me out. My sisters are way more than capable on handling everything that comes towards them, but, I can't help but to think about the scary things in life and how badly I want those scary things to never hurt them. So, but feel that responsibility. I feel this immeasurable weight on my shoulders to be the best brother I can to them and just be a good human. Just do whatever they need me to do, whatever it may be. I really cherish that. I really, really do. I appreciate the chance to like have siblings that love me and that I love a lot. And also that come to me for things that want to spend time with me and when stuff is too difficult for them, that I know that they can come to me and be distracted. I'm kind of a black and white person, so sometimes they don't always want me to tell them things, especially like Katie, my little sister, she don't listen to nothing I say. I've come to terms with that getting into our mid to late 20s. I've really come to terms that I can't just like tell her things like I'm like our big brother, I kind of have to just be her big brother and be supportive. Our relationship has kind of changed in that way that it used to be like I'm trying to, you know, guide her in a certain way and making sure that she's doing the right thing, but she's only proven to be, like I said, capable. So now I just let her tell me things as things happen, and I got to be receptive. And it's also opened me up to telling her things that I previously couldn't or wouldn't more so. Me and my older sister have always had a pretty comfortable relationship in that way. I feel like I've always been able to tell my older sister things, and in turn it feels like she's always been able to tell me things. I know that me and Kara make Katie feel very uncomfortable sometimes with how open we are about talking with things, talking about things. But being a middle child, it's that forgotten child. It's always they're the second one, or not necessarily I'm the second one, but they're in the middle. The baby's the youngest, the oldest is you're supposed to be the prime example, and whatever the middle child does, at least we got two out of three. That's always been my joke is least my younger sister is a career woman and just pushing life and doing great things. And then my older sister is a loving mother and absolutely great person. And I'm just kind of here. I don't mind, I guess, being forgotten. I do, but I know I'm not hot. I know my sisters love me and my parents love me, and so even though I'm the middle, I guess I talked more about being the middle sibling, but being like the middle child, I've always felt like the glue, not the center of attention, but the glue in the middle to hold my older sibling Kara and my younger sibling Katie together. But very much so, I love being a brother, and I hope that my sisters always know that I'm there for them, and whatever they need, I'll do it. I'll jump off of whatever cliff you tell me to. I'll kill whoever you need me to. I'm sorry. But I appreciate being the middle child and being a brother to my sisters. So I quite often, I think, struggle with trying new foods, even just with cooking. Like, I can cook a few things, but usually if it doesn't involve like rice and just like some basic vegetables in the oven, then I have a tendency to like not really do it. I always want to try foods and try new things, but I think sometimes when I look up recipes, I get too overwhelmed. There's like all these steps and all these processes to go through, so it then turns me off of wanting to try something new, to try a new meal. So I was thinking about just new recipes. I always, like I said, always want to try new foods. I know a lot of people out there can put that sentiment that you always want to be adventurous in whatever little ways you can, and food sometimes doesn't seem that dangerous. And I'm always for trying something. Truly, it feels like every time that I've like tried something new in my life that it hasn't really hurt me, especially with food. So I'm always wanting to I always find recipes on social media or watching YouTube or whatever it may be. But like I said, if it ain't like rice or some other like go-to foods, like cut up some veggies and put it in the oven or brown off some, ground meat in the pan or whatever, or bake some chicken. It's like, I just have certain go-to foods. And I quite often, I mean, I've been so bad about I eat fast food almost every day. I just don't have like this will to cook quite often. So my go-to is I have like four restaurants. Like one of them is McDonald's, one of them is Chick-fil-A, and then Jersey Mike's, and then pizza. So I literally only do these places because I know they taste good and or at least to a point. And I know I like a certain thing from these places, so it's the go-to. It's the comfort thing. I think everybody has a comfort food or that one thing that you know you're not gonna dislike. Even sometimes I think that can help with then throwing it into a new recipe, right? You know you love rice or something like that. I love rice, so there are plenty of foods and meals out there that involve rice. So I should feel decently confident in that sense. But I get sick of the usual stuff. I really do. I get here and I even think about getting like I worry myself about getting sick on this stuff. That like one day I'm gonna love something and then the next day I won't. Especially when I've liked something for so long. It's kind of a letdown. I'm already like thinking about the letdown even though it hasn't happened that often. I really can't think of too many foods in my life that I like drain myself out on. Truly. I keep it pretty simple and I don't hone in too often on like multiple days on something. Like when I have cooked and when I do cook, like I'll make it for maybe a couple days, but then I'll wait a couple weeks to do it again. I just don't want to like drain myself. I know that I can handle a little flavor. I can handle some seasonings and some spices and stuff like that. So I'm not scared about the flavor of things necessarily. I'm a when it comes to like sensitive eating, I'm more of like a texture person. Like I struggle with like things that don't have the right texture. But flavors I can get behind. I could try to find maybe a couple notes of things. I don't have like that complex of a palate though, so things do get kind of lost. But I like spicy things. I think that's where I really hone into on when I cook. I want to like overspice things, and I quite often do. So I know that there's plenty of like Hispanic cuisines, right? That just involve a lot of spice. Also, like a couple Asian cuisines, Indian cuisines like curry or something like that. So I know that there's like and those can involve rice. Most Asian and Hispanic dishes have rice. So I know I'm good in those paths. I can make some I can make some tacos with some rice and I'm fine. Dude, whatever. I just get so basic. But I think that kind of helps. If I can kind of think about if I want to do new recipes and, cook something new that keep it basic. Like I have my go-to foods, that's a good place to start. Plenty of things to have with rice and make with rice, so I can just do that. Or like noodles, you know what I'm saying? Things like I could cook up a steak and cook up a couple different veggies and maybe like marinate the steak in something or marinate the veggies in something. So sometimes it can be kind of a simplistic thing. Work my way up into the more complex dishes where it's like you have to like cook something a certain way to then cook it into this and then you got to add it together and but if you get this consistency then it's going to throw this off and if you don't left this soften or you don't let this cook all the way through then you're messed. So it's like a responsibility. I could follow steps on like a cookbook. I have no problem following steps. It's just like the if it don't look like the picture, then I don't think I'm gonna want it. Betty Crocker made Hamburger Helper look good. I don't think Betty Crocker made Hamburger Helper. I think it was Hamburger Helper, but you know what I'm saying. Those pictures on the boxes always look good, and it never was the same for me. um, the number of ingredients I think was really where the overwhelmingness. If I got to put tons of stuff into it, not necessarily spices, but like tons of ingredients, tons of little things, then I might forget something and then I just don't want to make it. Even though sometimes you can just like leave things out of certain dishes, but I just don't want to mess it up. I want to keep the integrity of the recipe to the point. But I try to do my best a little bit here, a little bit there. When I actually go out to restaurants, I know that certain foods I like at certain restaurants, so why not try something different, right? Just be as open and be open to going to different restaurants. Even though I've had like Mexican food before, maybe a new Mexican restaurant that like I've never been to might have a dish that I've never had. So that wouldn't be hard to try. Just go simple to complex. You know, just try to avoid the whole like I say, avoid overdoing them too. I just think I build it up too much in my head and I have to have the will to cook in the first place, as we all kind of do. It has to be that will to cook, and quite often that time you put into prepping things, and it just is a lot. It just like then by the time the meal's done, then was it worth it type thing. To be able to eat the meal is makes it worth it to me. It may taste a little different than how you thought or whatever, but the fact that you're now eating something you successfully made is good enough for me. But I'm always out there looking, and I know that even with like if I had a little more money and maybe like my own kitchen to mess up, I'd be more adventurous. But who else like what are some of y'all's favorite recipes? What are y'all's like go-to dinners or like go-to meals? No matter how complex or simple it is. Sometimes it gets easy, right? It may be complex to some, but easy for you. But everybody try new foods. Don't stick to the same old stuff. I quite often go searching around the internet for a variety of different articles or just anything that kind of piques my interest. And a couple weeks ago, I was reading an article that it had a term in it that I didn't know was like a real thing, or it was a term for a certain like law, I guess, that I didn't know was like a thing. And it was emergency blacklist. Emergency meaning like emergency services. So I was reading this article. The place I read it was Futurism was the name of the site or the source. Maggie Harrison was the person that wrote the article. But in the article, she wrote about a man from Seattle, a man named William Urich. I hope I said that right. He was 48 years old, and a couple years ago, November of 2021, he had died of a heart attack. And while he was having the heart attack, his 13-year-old son called 911. The emergency services, the EMTs, showed up to the house before the police. And it took them 13 minutes to then enter the house. And them entering the house was a broken protocol. And so this article was talking about how the reason that these EMTs couldn't go in was because this address, not the man himself, but the address was on an emergency blacklist that apparently in Seattle and other cities around the nation that if there's like a history of toxicness or kind of disorderliness towards the police at a certain address that they go on what was seemingly like like a permanent blacklist that police have to respond first before anything else. So whether you're having a medical emergency or something like a fire, you have to wait for police. And that's sneaky. Apparently Seattle paid out $2 million to the family of this man, which I mean, no amount of money is ever going to bring a life back. And I heard that the family was just grateful that this was brought to the attention, and it was never about the money. It was about change. And also, I heard that they're very much so appreciative of the EMTs that broke protocol, and good on those people. But it's apparently a hidden system in Seattle. Like I don't think people can openly go and like look up and see if their address has been marked or not. And when I was reading is that it's also quite outdated that they don't do anything to reanalyze or review more so the addresses. So once there's a sort of a history, even that to a point of like obviously we know what hostility towards police is, but how frequent? Is it like a one-time thing and then you're blacklisted, or does it have to be a multi-offense thing? They were saying that the man, even if it was immediate care, that he had a 25% chance of survival. So this man was suffering a severe heart attack. 25% is way better than zero. And obviously that 13 minutes was it lessened that 25% to zero. And Apparently, it was more so, it wasn't the man himself that was disorderly or that, like, in a past life or whatever type thing, that he was hostile towards police. It was not the fact. From what I was reading, is that apparently this man had lived at the same like apartment building for a long time, but in recent time had moved to a new unit, a new apartment in the same complex. And that specific apartment was blacklisted from that previous tenant's bull crap. So, unknowingly, the man moved into that place. They didn't tell him it was blacklisted. Nobody told him about the previous owner's behavior. And, maybe he knew from living in the same apartment complex, but, if you're living over on one side, you're not going to know what's going on the other side. If you ever live in in an apartment complex, you know that there's quite often broken off sections. So, from someone else's mistakes and from someone else's behaviors, this man paid the ultimate price. And so, apparently, after this story kind of came out and all this stuff went down, that other people apparently had reported it, and even like a 911 operator that worked for Seattle was fired for pointing out the flaw, was fired for calling out the system that they have to uphold. That's crazy. But how thankful of Seattle to say that, oh, well, we'll just remove the notes. After 365 days, a year, we'll review the address. It's just so bullshit. Sorry for my language. It just doesn't make sense. Now, I can also sit here and admit that there are people that are hostile, right? And there's almost this like, well, if you don't want the help from emergency services, then why should they be there for you? Well, as people who exist on this earth and humans go, you don't know how people are. You don't know what's going on in their life. And if they need help, they need help. And it's quite often we see it all the time, that kind of karma bite where, people are like, F emergency services, F the police, F the government, and then you need them. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't deserve the help from them. So I guess maybe Seattle changes that. And if this is a thing that's in other major cities around the world, around the US, around the world, that this is something that changes. It's understood to know that there are certain areas that maybe are not as easy for cops to move into or emergency service to function in. But you shouldn't have to then base it all the way on that. This man was an innocent man. He moved into another unit in the same apartment complex and had to pay the consequences for the previous tenant's choices. And a hidden system that nobody knows how it works, nobody knows what goes on, extremely outdated. It's stupid. Imagine living into or moving into like a new home in Seattle and something happens and you can't get any help because you're blacklisted. I would like to believe that our governments are really trying to help us, that there are certain policies and laws that are enacted to make things better, safer, convenient, whatever it may be. But then obvious flaws like this happen. And when do the flaws outweigh the good things about the system? Too big of a question for me to really say, but it is something to think about. All right, friends, that's really all I have to say about that. Episode 24 in the bag. If you want to listen to this episode or any of my other episodes, you can go on YouTube or Spotify podcast under the Odd Thoughts podcast and enjoy them. If you liked it or found it relatable in any way, then I'd also appreciated it if you subscribe to the podcast. You can follow me on all my other socials. I have a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well. All those links will be in my description as well as the end of the video. But nonetheless, thank y'all for tuning in. Thank y'all for stopping by. I love y'all a whole lot, and I just appreciate the chance to get to talk to people and get up on the microphone and just spew my thoughts out there. But, anyways, I love y'all. I appreciate everyone. Make sure to show up for yourselves every single day and be excellent to each other.